time we do this, something different happens with the technology. It's always a different bug. So, look. Different computer. So, look, good evening, everybody. June 30 meeting of the Community Council. Really happy to see everybody masked up. I just took it off to talk to you. I'll put it back on. We've got sanitizer there. I hope you've all signed in. We're having a conversation this evening with Chris Steele, the Minister, WA, and Minister for Transport and Services, and a plethora of other things. They're all constructive. In effect, the Mayor of the town. I'll come back then after. I'll do a quick presentation on some questions to be sent to Chris. Then Chris will reply, and then we'll have a Q&A. Then I'll come back and go through the humdrum business of the association. You are being broadcast, people at home. When I looked a few minutes ago, there were 3 or 4 people there. We're a bit short on committee members tonight, so we may not have a chance to get messages from them and to questions. It's just a manpower issue. I apologise, those at home. And anyway, we might as well get started. So there is our agenda. And we'll return to that through the evening. Now, a couple of weeks ago, 10 days ago, I sent Chris a series of questions about what we'd like to talk about tonight. They've taken them on board. I assume that's Hannah. Good to meet you. So we want to talk about the Brierly St upgrade first. Now you may have seen today's media. Yes. We've got a bit of coverage on Win. I haven't seen it. Have you seen it, Chris? No. I had an interview on ABC Radio. I said some nice things about consultation. There'll probably something coming on the Riot Act. I don't know what else is coming. And we will put some stuff up as well, including links to the USA consultation. And we'll go from there. It's actually quite good to see a lot of the things that we had in that earlier survey coming out. So anyway, questions were about Brierly St. Well, this is a good question. It was, what's the Minister see as the objective of the project? And then how are we going to go forward? And we'll flow through from there. And then we want to talk about the Duffy shopping centre upgrade. And I understand Richard's here, is he? Or Sophie? Richard and Sophie. Good. I'll come on afterwards. We want to talk about transport and light rail. Now, obviously, light rail is happening. The government's got an agenda. We complain about all we like, if you like, but it's going to happen. What we need to think about here is disruption and how it's going to affect us during the construction period. We also need to work out the best arrangements for us, as in Western Creek, when we transit with it. Let's take a positive attitude and let's see what the best we can get out of it. Parking. Yes, parking. We've been talking to the Directorate about parking. We've had quite a good dialogue, and I can give you feedback later about that. Then we want to move on to roads and various intersections. We noticed in the budget there were some upgrades for some roads. We've voted a few further suggestions of roads that might need a bit of attention, and a few that annoy us in our day-to-day interactions. And I took on board everything that I had received up until we sent it out. Even on the day I sent it out, I was getting suggestions. We've had our pedal power friends who've suggested something on cycling, and a couple of people have been asking how the project funding works. We had a bit of a conversation here over a couple of meetings, so we thought we'd put it on the list. These also came in about the sports facilities, basketball courts, the vet oval, and I want to cheekily ask Chris at the end, Did you read our submission to the budget process and how much largesse they're throwing our way? So I might invite you up, Chris, early on, but we've got a microphone there. Got one down the back of the room if anybody wants to ask some questions.
Thanks, Bill. And I'll start by saying not all Warri, Darrell, Dindi, Wangirri, Jindi, acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting in today, the Ngunnawal people. Pay my respects to their elders. Thank you, Bill, and thanks for your work in stepping in to the chair of the Western Creek Community Council. And I'd like to also begin by acknowledging, because I haven't had the opportunity to at this point, the work of Tom Anderson in this group, who for many years has been a really strong advocate on behalf of the Western Creek community. Thanks for having me here. It's a really great opportunity to have a talk to you about a huge range of things. And one of those Bill mentioned off the get-go, which was the announcement today around the commitment to upgrade Brierly Street, which is Western Creek's main street here at Coleman Court. At the election, Labor committed $2 million to upgrade the street. It's a really important street. It has a number of restaurants and cafes along it, and there's huge opportunity to reimagine this street, improve the infrastructure, which is ageing, potentially improve dining options for outdoor dining, really make it a place to visit, particularly with the growing region here, and make sure that Coleman Court remains a really great place to visit, even if other shopping centres are being developed elsewhere. So I think that's probably what I'd say is the objective of the project, as well as safety. We know that safety has been raised as a concern. We've currently got work just starting. You might have seen some of the signs and some of the Transport Canberra City Services workers out on Leadette Street and Parkinson Street. We're doing some work to provide safe pedestrian crossings across each of those streets, but we want to hear from the community as part of this work on Brierly Street what other safety improvements they'd like to see, particularly given that the car park entrance actually comes off Brierly Street as well, and the car park, for anyone that's stood around, as many politicians have during the election for a long period of time, sees some pretty interesting driver behaviour around that area. So what is it that we can do to make that safer? Now, one of those ideas from the community has been in the past to look at whether we make this a pedestrian zone, Brierly Street, or a shared zone, or a one-way area, potentially removing buses and taxis from the street, or parking, widening the verge. There's a whole range of options, so we're keen to hear from the community about what you'd like to see, and some of those have implications for the transport network that we'll need to consider, making sure that we've still got places for people to, particularly with mobility issues, to be dropped off close to Coleman Court to do their shopping, if it's from a taxi, for example. And we'll need to talk to traders as well along the street about what impact removing parking might have, if that's what the community is proposing, or what other arrangements might be put in place so that we can get the best of all worlds. So that consultation is running until the 6th of August, and there's a number of pop-ups that will be occurring, particularly in July at Trinity Square. And we're keen for the community to come down and provide their view, and Western Creek Community Council will come up with their view. And I know you've already been consulting through a survey, which is fantastic. And I know Marisa Patterson, my lady colleague in the Assembly, has been doing some consultation as well, which will all feed into this consultation and will help to inform the designs on that piece of work. Later on, I think we're going to have some presentations from Transport Canberra City Services about the consultation that we've been doing at Duffy shops and the upgrades there to try and improve that local shopping centre, and how what feedback we've been able to glean from the community, which I think has been a really good process. We've been doing a considerable amount of work on particularly road and transport infrastructure in the region, particularly the growing region of Molonglo. Pretty much every road around Molonglo is under some sort of study at the moment. It's either the construction on upgrades, it's either the planning stage or in the design stage, heading towards construction. So a few of those which I'll mention in particular are the John Gordon Drive Bridge. Contrary to what you've heard in the media, this project is on track for starting construction in 2023. A considerable amount of work is happening behind the scenes, and while you may not see construction starting until 2023, there's a lot of work on what is a very large and complex infrastructure project to make sure that the designs are right. and this will be, of course, an important connection through the Molonglo Valley, not only for private vehicles but for public transport, with potential future light rail which will be built into the design. It'll be important active travel connection, and it will provide 500 metres worth of leading road to the actual bridge itself, which will provide connections into the Molonglo Commercial Centre. So that work is going on. It's of course been DA approved, and we'll move into the procurement phase for the design and the detailed design and construction delivery partner very shortly in the next few months, which will help us to deliver this project. And we're expecting that to be a tier 1 firm to be able to deliver such a large project. And then we're also undertaking work on capacity improvements in the Tuggeranong Parkway, knowing that the traffic in Molonglo is growing, potentially looking at, for example, a third extra lane from the Cotter Road through to Glenlock interchange to deal with the amount of traffic flow that we expect over coming decades. It's work happening on Parks Way to look at the capacity improvements there and what border improvements we can make to improve traffic flow, because all of that Tuggeranong Parkway traffic, William Hobble Drive traffic goes on to Parks Way. William Hobble Drive will be duplicated over the coming year, which is a major piece of work, which will also support the growing region, not only in Molonglo but in Juneberry as well. Planning is still underway on the east-west arterial route, which will connect through Molonglo and eventually to the Western Investigation area, to the Tuggeranong Parkway just south of the Arboretum, so a major new arterial road which is in planning for the early part of 2030, which will help again manage the growth that we're going to see in the region. Further planning work is underway on Molonglo 3, which is the new suburbs which are to the east of Whitlam, including a new arterial road connecting through to Big Duffy Street, which will be a significant public transport corridor as well. So virtually every road is under a piece of work around this area because of the work that we're seeing, and we're also closely monitoring public transport as well in response to the pandemic, where we have seen a significant drop in the number of people using public transport right around the world and cities around Australia as well as in here in Canberra, and that is starting to have an impact in terms of the number of cars that we're seeing on the ACT roads. So significant increase in number of cars at peak times on our road network, and that's concerning because it's not sustainable, it's not good for our city, for people to be stuck in congestion at peak times. And so we're currently working through a public transport recovery plan, looking at ways that we can support people on. I know the Community Council has some ideas around park and ride. That's certainly something that we're interested in looking at further. And also, we know the congestion's bad now, but there is going to be significant disruption as a result of the construction of some major infrastructure projects, both public infrastructure but also some private projects around Canberra in the years ahead. And so there is quite a lot of planning happening now around how we mitigate that as much as possible. And as we continue with those works, we'll work with the delivery partner around the program delivery of each of those construction works, so that we've got measures in place to help manage traffic, give clear communication. I think working with the Community Council is going to be important, so that the community is informed around what options they can take to help minimise the disruption on their commute. Public transport is going to be a key way of helping to minimise that disruption, so looking at how we can enhance transport options, particularly from here to the city, but also to other areas for local trips and the like. So there's a range of different strategies there, and I'll keep you updated as we progress on that. And I also note that you've made reference to the feasibility studies on the intersections of Street and Drive, including the intersections with Namatjira Drive and Hyson Street. So those feasibility studies are underway, and we're hoping those will inform us about what the best interventions are at those intersections. Lights, for example, to provide better crossing access for pedestrians and cyclists, but also for cars doing right turning movements out of them safely, whilst ensuring that we don't hold up traffic on Street and Drive as much as possible as well, and also noting that there are other intersections on that. How do we make sure that they're all linked up and sequenced to make sure that we've got the best traffic volume moving through there on what is quite a busy road, particularly in the morning. So there's a lot of work going on. I might just leave it there and then take any questions. That might be the best way of going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
Are there any questions? Nora. Now, Nora, because since we've got lots of people at home, I'd like you to use the microphone at the back, or what would you prefer? So?
I'm sorry I'm late. Did you talk about the Wogan Hospital, the emergency at all? Did you raise that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, because I was just wondering if the underground car parks were asked, well, not just patients, but staff and everyone are concerned there with the car parking so far away from the hospital. So we were actually suggesting that a multi-storey underground car park under the emergency building, because it's all new starting, so it's easy enough to do. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, parking is a challenge at the Canberra Hospital campus, and that's why quite a significant amount of work was done in the lead up to construction beginning on the new hospital expansion. In fact, contracts were signed with Multiplex this week to facilitate the first main works happening on that project. Early works, of course, decanting of existing buildings has been occurring for some time, so there's been a lot of construction work happening there. And in the lead up to that, the car park of 1,100 places was constructed on Hindmarsh Drive, not too far away from the hospital campus. That was mainly to accommodate not only help for staff, but also for any construction vehicles as we move into the construction period, because we know that there's going to be a lot of utes parked in and around the hospital. We need to make sure that we're managing that appropriately. In parallel with that, the ACT government is undertaking a master planning process around the hospital campus more broadly. Parking and public transport are some of the key considerations as part of that master plan. We have in recent times built a multi-storey car park at the Wogan Hospital to accommodate, but we know that as the services grow, as the population grows, we'll actually need more parking, and so that is part of that master planning process, and I encourage people to have their say as part of that process around parking, and certainly looking at other options and other spaces for multi-storey parking on site is part of that. And we're looking forward to that plan being finalised so that we can take those forward.
Underground parking would be solved.
Could be underground, could be podium parking, a range of options could be considered.
Thank you. I was just looking at your feasibility study you're doing on two intersections on the street. And, as part of your upgrade of Brierly, are you considering the intersection of Hindmarsh and Brierly?
Not at this point in time. We are closely monitoring that intersection, and we certainly acknowledge that as part of the Western Creek Group Centre Master Plan, that was identified as one that we should look at in the future. So based on the advice that we've had from our Transport Canvassing Services team, the intersections of Hyson and Namatjira have been identified as priorities, and that's why we're undertaking feasibility studies there. But we are looking at that intersection with Brierly and Hindmarsh and what we need to do in the future on that street as well. We know that there's a lot more people moving in and out of Coleman Court. It's a very popular and busy street. We expect that to continue to grow in the future, so that's going to be an important consideration there. And whether, again, if we do take that forward, we'll need to undertake some sort of feasibility to gather the evidence around what the best design of a new intersection there might be.
Thank you. If I could just add to that Brierly Street intersection, certainly in the interim, some clearance of some shrubbery would allow the visibility to be much improved.
I think that's a really reasonable suggestion. I've had a few people raise shrubbery issues on Street Drive as well, in the lead up to some of the intersections that's creating issues with sight lines, so that's something we are thinking about. I'm happy to raise it. We have officials here from Roads ACT to raise that.
Okay, I'll throw my one in then, Chris. The Mully Street intersection with Street Drive, it's got terrible sight lines, and it's got that great ridge, metal construction, whatever it is. And on top of that, you've also got those lanes, the crazy lane arrangement there where the merge starts before. the metal, so people turning out of Mully Street doing right-hand turns at certain times of day, the plane rushing wet. And I don't know what the cure is. I'm just saying it's an issue. There's quite a bit of broken glass down there. It's a regular feature, and you've got a school on the corner, so you've got a lot of school traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. So that I expect that there'll be some comment on that intersection as part of the feasibility studies on the rest of the road, because we need to look at the whole street holistically. So certainly that intersection has been raised in terms of the sightline issue. So I've raised that with the team to see what I can do. Removing trees is not the first option, but certainly potentially cut some of the back to provide greater sight lines. But there are a lot of intersections around Canberra that are in the seagull design, which aren't necessarily the safest, and we're just committed to a road safety strategy which has a focus on the safety systems approach, one of which is reducing speeds and so forth, but also the key things, infrastructure, making sure we've got safe intersections. We've got to be careful about what we do along that street. If we signalise every single intersection, it could cause quite a significant delay for people moving through from other suburbs. So, but I appreciate for people in Holder, that is an intersection that they're particularly interested in, making sure that they're safe. There may be a range of treatments that aren't necessarily installing traffic lights, but we'll find out more once we've been able to gather the evidence through this process, and we'll keep you in the loop.
Hey, just a quick one on Hindmarsh Road, Chris. The pedestrian access on Hindmarsh Road is very patchy. Sometimes you're behind shrubs on a walking track that's been beaten by people's feet. Sometimes there's a proper concrete carpet that winds down and up and then down. You're quite far away from the road. It's really interesting having a look at getting us and our kids and so on to be able to walk from Western Creek to Woden, to actually have that as an active travel route for pedestrian site will be better than it is.
Yeah, look, we're interested in doing work to improve active travel and making sure that there's connections between particularly local centres, and for Western Creek, Woden is the town centre, so that's a key active travel link. There are existing links there are some underpasses as well in various parts of the suburbs, in Warramanga and in Western as well. The Hyacinth Street link, of course, was one of those links that we built, and the second, I should mention, the second stage is actually starting construction this week as well, which is on Devonport Street, running from Hyacinth through to Launceston Street. The Launceston section is stage 3, it was actually completed before stage 2, much far less complex section. So there is work happening, and we're interested in what we can do to improve those active travel links. And in relation to the C5 route, which was mentioned specifically, which is the route that connects through to Belconnen and the city in Western Creek, I have spoken with Pedal Power about that. One of the key commitments we made at the election was improving and investing more in shared path maintenance, and that is one of our shared paths. So to improve those significantly, I think the focus is on making sure that they've got really good surfaces, so that we're encouraging more people to take up cycling to work. As part of that, there may be opportunities to potentially improve the width of the path, which is, I think, what they're getting at in terms of the new standards. But it would have to, we'd have to consider that on in terms of where the maintenance is done. Often what you get, which I think Pedal Power complains about the most, is you sort of lengthen, widen one section, but it only goes for 10 metres, and then it goes back to the ordinary sort of 1.5 metre or 2 metre path. So these things need to be done holistically. My focus is on making sure that we've got smooth paths that are free from cracks and safety issues first, before we sort of look at widening existing paths. Where we build brand new paths, of course, we'll always make sure that they're wide paths, and Hyacinth Street's a great example of that, which is a 3 metre wide path the whole way.
Chris, sorry, I was late, so I probably dismissed what you started on. It sounds like local traffic. I just had a couple of comments, really comments. I'm fairly convinced from my observations that one of the ways to improve the flow of traffic is to have long, whatever you call them, inserts where you're turning left. I know you can't do it everywhere, but there are some good examples around town where those things have been lengthened. One was when the big roundabout on the Barton Highway was started and people coming out of Price, etc. Instead of having 25 metres to sit in the left-hand lane, it's now 150 whatever. I'm convinced that you can make a lot of flow improvements by getting people out of the main direction because they want to go left and get them over sooner and for longer because everybody else then can advance to the lights. You mentioned pavements, I'd just like to compliment Molongolo's pavements. They're excellent. I know it's not Western Creek, but there's a huge difference and I go over there a lot. I'm involved with the forum over there and the pleasures of having wider footpaths than Western Creek has had for 40 years. It's fantastic. And there was something else I was going to say, but just escaped for the moment. So, thank you.
No worries. There's a bit of work happening as well, just connecting some of those paths in Molonglo through to the broader cycle network at the moment. So the SMA's doing some work on that. We'll hopefully move through the construction phases and the concept design phase at the moment.
Are there any more online, Bobby?
I'm just concerned about Brierly Street that you wanted to shut down. You're not doing that.
Sorry, which one?
Brierly Street, just here where the post office, that's our entrance to the post office box. And where our post office box is there too. So I'm just hoping, have you dumped that thought to close down Brierly Street? Because there's a lot of other businesses there too that don't need access to Brierly Street shut down. No one can get to those businesses either.
Yeah, so we're keen to hear from the community about what they'd like to see on Brierly Street. We don't have any preconceived ideas about what we want to do. We are genuinely wanting to ask the community, do you want this street to exist as it is now? No change in terms of the traffic arrangements at least. Do you want to see a shared zone, so still keep cars but share it with pedestrians and make sure that the features of the road support a safer environment for pedestrians? Or whether there's a different type of arrangement where it is a pedestrian only zone. That is an option that people are bringing forward to government. And so we want to consult on that and get people's feedback. And I take the point of view that you want access to the post office. There's of course other ways to get to the post office on the other side, on Leonette Street. So there's options there as well. But certainly potentially making it a pedestrian only zone would remove some of the parking, which may make it more difficult for some people to sort of do a quick drop off into some of the businesses, including the post office. So that's why we want to talk to those businesses about what they think, whether it would impact their businesses significantly in doing that, whether there are other arrangements that can be made, whether it should be a one-way street, whether we just keep the current arrangement but widen the verges so that there's more space for pedestrians on the side of the road, and that we narrow the road so that it indicates to traffic that this is a slow area. We need to be slowing down a lot more than 40k an hour, which is the current speed limit around Brierly Street. So
is that still going, or?
Yeah, so all of those options are on the table. We're keen to hear views, and then the consultation's open until the 6th of August.
Chris, sorry, I recall what I was going to say, just in terms of general comments on traffic flow. I mean, I don't know whether we're talking about public transport in general in Canberra, but I can leave that. But certainly, there's a huge reluctance, we all know, for people to get out of their cars. Now, however hard you and the government try, you probably couldn't dust, but do your best. But I think there's potential. I know quite a few people now who ride electric scooters to work. Some of them quite long distances out this way and other places that people have come across. And I think there's possibly some way, instead of just saying it's got to be public transport, it's got to be cars, there might be something in the middle there where you can make some marginal benefits with park and ride close to the work centres, In particular, I was around the lake today. There's heaps of people parking at the Rock Museum, heaps of people parking on the, where they do the boating on, where the grammar school and all the rest of it do their boating, their rowing events, and then other parts around the edge of the uni. So people are obviously trying to get part of the way by car, and then use other forms of transport to get there. So I think there's potential if you created a lot more park and rides, people could still use their car. It wouldn't be an hour and a half to get home, to get back to the car to take the kids to soccer or something. And they might use more active transport in combination with that car.
And I think it's a really good point because active transport and public transport, it won't be for everyone. People will need different options, and providing as many of those options as possible so that people can make their own decisions. Whether it's the family doing the double drop off in the morning, but maybe being able to jump into a park and ride and then catching a bus onwards so that they can come back close to the school and pick up their children. Those sorts of things we're thinking about, particularly as we head into this period of potential disruption to try and give people more options. We've got a member here who skateboards into work most days, so there are people doing it, and I think you were referring to the park and bike, which is on the lake there in the rowing shed, which is an option for people to actually drive most of the way in, but then park their car and then ride. So if they've got the bike in the back of the car, then ride the rest of the way, quite a scenic distance into work. So there are a range of different options for people. E-bikes have become a good way for particularly people with mobility issues that can't ride the distance to be able to get in. But clearly, the e-scooters have been really popular in a way that we probably underestimated it. They haven't come to this region yet in terms of the e-scooter share schemes. People want to buy their own, and they're of course available. But so the e-scooter share scheme is something we're just reviewing at the moment, and what the implications of that have been over the around half of the year that it's been operating, what further safety improvements we need to make before it rolls out to other areas. But we will consider whether we want to also roll it out to other areas as well. So, good points. And just on the left turn issue, take your point that there's some improvements that can be made to some of the intersections by giving people opportunity to turn left earlier. It does have some implications for safety, particularly for pedestrians, depending on where it is. So it needs to be considered on a case-by-case basis. But I agree with it's all the button highway intersection with the signalised lights that all those crazy people can avoid the lights by just going around, which in that area not a high pedestrianised zone, but in other areas maybe sort of more inappropriate, so we've got to just deal with them on a case-by-case basis, and that's why we do those feasibility studies to kind of look at all of those different options and what the safety issues are.
Chris?
If I could just continue on that point, I've read a fair bit of stuff online
people's comments on public transport, but clearly most people aren't that happy with it, and that's why I'm sort of trying to push this halfway over. They want to still be able to get to their car reasonably quickly, and I just think there's enormous opportunities around town to have huge park and ride areas where people will, your car's only 2k from Civic, it's not 10k. And so you can sort of fit that in with a bit of a ride or a walk or a e-scooter or something else. And still have that comfort, but anyway.
So we're looking at more areas, and I think and we've just expanded the northwestern park and ride by 40 places as well, so that's relatively, unfortunately it's completed during the pandemic, so we haven't quite seen how it's being used at the moment, so we'll have to monitor that and whether there's opportunities for more park and rides, usually next to a rapid service, so people can just jump on the rapid, don't need to look at a timetable, can just go straight into the city or wherever they need to go. The rapid services, which are only relatively new, unfortunately, the pandemic has struck and a lot of people haven't been able to test out those, like we increased services on the R10, for example, from the Longlow significantly, but it was during the pandemic, so I think it's an opportunity at the right time, based on health advice, to actually welcome people back onto public transport. Hey, come and try out the system that actually has changed a lot since you last used it, but also attracted a new user group on board as well that probably weren't using public transport prior to the pandemic. And the investments that we're making in light rail in particular are trying to encourage people into public transport user groups that haven't used it before, and that's what we've seen in stage one, where the most recent survey showed that about 30% of people using it had never used a bus in the past. So it's got a pulling power that buses simply don't have. It's more comfortable to ride. It's more convenient for people to understand where it's going and where the stops are. So we're hoping that expansion to Woden is going to have the same effect. And of course, the Western Creek services will need to have a discussion in a few years' time, I expect, about how the buses will connect from Western Creek to that service, and so people will benefit here as well through those connections. But possibly more connections as a result of light rail coming here, because it will free up more bus services to be able to be delivered to the suburbs.
Yeah, we've started flagging that, as you would have noticed in the budget letter and points asked to talk about. Can I take you to the R7 bus? It's a very good service, does sort of what John talks about, but I can never understand why it runs from Duffy down Hindmarsh Drive to Coolman Court runs empty when you've got suburbs up there that people have to catch an alternative bus and change buses to Coolman Court. And it's just in like the other alternative is an extra stop on the street and drive would certainly enhance the caption of that service. So we like it, but we're suggesting a bit of fine-tuning.
Yeah, and I think the extension down Hindmarsh Drive right to the end of Chapman there, it is a new connection that didn't exist before for a rapid, and so I think we're keen to hear from you about your ideas about extra stops on Hindmarsh and Streeton. They do require substantial infrastructure investment because we, especially on a sort of arterialised street, we need to provide sort of bus bays built in with the appropriate sort of hard stand to be able to cater for a heavy bus on the side of the road. But it is something that absolutely could be facilitated. But the thing is, if you have a bus stop on a major arterial like that at the moment, you need to be able to cross to the other side of the road. And that's very difficult to do on street and drive, and that's why the traffic lights are actually going to be important to provide an opportunity for pedestrians to cross to the right side of the road so they can then catch the bus on to wherever they need to go. So that's certainly, I think the two will work hand in hand, and with more people living along there with that future AFP development, which was rejected by the Planning Authority, will no doubt come back again. I'm sure it'll be well used.
My thinking on the R7 is actually wanting to run it through Chapman and Roulette or through Duffy and Holder. And it'd probably free up other resources by doing it. And transform Canberra, but hate you when you see that.
Chris, you mentioned the AFP site and that no doubt we'll get some development there. An interesting synergy that I've been thinking about is the fact that there's a design for toilets at Featherston Gardens. And no doubt the residents who end up living there will benefit from Featherston Gardens, which is like an area that we need to let the community know is there more. But toilets is a really important part because then people can go and do things there. You have kids' parties there and stuff if there's toilets. I just wonder if there's any chance of speaking with the developer, and maybe as they do it, because, you know...
I encourage you to speak to them as well. Like I'm not going to speak for the Independent Planning Authority around what they do. I'm not going to get
asking you to, I'm just saying as a local member,
yeah.
It would be so great, and there's, they will want the community to like what they build there. Could be helpful if they build us a toilet as well. Seeing as they've built a sewage anyway.
Off-site works are coming to, I guess the planning review is underway at the moment, by the way. Please get involved in the community consultation on that as well. It's a complete rewrite of the Planning and Development Act. How we assess these sorts of developments when they come forward through the Independent Planning Authority. Off-site works have sort of come up from time to time, and this is directly adjacent to that development, what opportunities there are. On that particular development, they had actually suggested that they would partially fund intersection upgrades adjacent on High Street. So yes, these things can be done, and we certainly understand the importance of toilets there. We've got a number of new toilets going in a range of different places. Usually they're in highly trafficked areas though, I would say. I know we're trying, it's a bit of chicken and egg, but usually they're in areas that are like shopping centres, for example, where you've got large numbers of people coming on a sort of daily basis, and And there are other issues that are raised with them that we need to consult with, of course, around social issues and so forth around them to make sure that they're used in an appropriate way.
I'll point out it's also in our budget better. It's also in the points we gave you. Everywhere I go, I hear toilets and feathers and gardens. I also mentioned on ABC radio this morning when they rang me about meeting people. They said, what do you want for Christmas? I said, well, people tell me a toilet and feathers and gardens.
Yeah, because once the toilet's there, it will suddenly become a much more popular place for all sorts of things.
And it's much more comfortable for workers.
Of course.
Volunteers can go for more than an hour, which would be nice.
Chris, can I take you to the 2 points on the screen? The basketball courts and the red oval, and whether you've got any views or anything to give us back on that?
Yeah, look, I'm not responsible in my portfolio for those two matters that are covered by the Sports Minister, Rebecca Barrett, so I'm happy to pass those on and raise with her those issues. In relation to basketball courts, in my capacity as a local member for the area, I've been talking with some of the basketball clubs from time to time, and of course the focus of the peak body for basketball has been on providing a centre in Belconnen. So sometimes the peak body has a different view to some of the local sporting organisations, and that can present a difficulty for government in terms of how we manage that. Having said that, we listen to all organisations. We're keen, particularly when new facilities come online, like the new Evelyn Scott School, which has absolutely fantastic facilities up at Devon Prospect. There is an opportunity, I think, for those groups to get in touch and see whether they can book out those halls. Basketball uses an incredible amount of space and time. They run all year. It's quite incredible. It's not really seasonal at all, and I think they run 3 competitions over the year or something. So they do need a lot of space, and I understand, the existing school halls and some of our decommissioned schools and so forth they've been using, but encourage them to look at using the new ones that have come online just recently. And then and we'll also look at further opportunities as schools expand and so forth to provide those kind of facilities that can be used by the public. In relation to Revette Oval, understand that this oval is designed in a particular way where drainage is an issue. Maintenance of the oval is an issue, so we'll continue to work with the organisation there. We've had a program of upgrading the amenities at our ovals, which has been ongoing. There's a substantial amount of stimulus funding that went into refurbishing our old changing rooms. I was playing soccer down at Warramenga playing fields the other weekend, before it was closed for the weather, and that change room's recently been upgraded there. So similar to that, where we sort of we'll redo the insides, put in new amenities, but keep the existing sort of old brick structure there as well, painted up. So we're looking at that, and I'll certainly ask a bit to see whether we can put Revette on the agenda for that upgrade program.
I think I heard there were no girls' change rooms down there at all.
Yeah, that's the focus of the program as well, is to actually create, often for the first time, female-only change rooms as well, where they haven't been available.
We've got an online comment, and I'd like to send you a question. Hi Claire, just to prove we read it. Outdoor dining in Brierly St, are you a strong supporter? Are you going to encourage it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a fantastic street. Really has a huge number of cafes and restaurants, and then there's even more within Coleman Court itself. So there's an opportunity for this to be more of a destination. The suggestion today by the owner of Lava Cafe was that possibly widening the verge might support more outdoor dining, putting up our umbrellas, having some more greenery, shrubs and the like. There's certainly an opportunity for more trees along there, which would make it is a very hot place during summer. Really is quite exposed. So yeah, it is, the paving there is, I think, probably had the end of its day as well. There's a lot we can do to make it more friendly so that we can actually get more people invited in, actually wanting to come down as a destination point. So yeah, absolutely. The businesses will need to consult with quite heavily, because they'll be particularly interested in what's happening outside their cafe, what the opportunities for them are to expand. Through the COVID-19 stimulus program, we've been trying to encourage more of that outdoor dining, because it is, in the COVID situation, safer to do so outdoors. And so, yeah, absolutely, that's going to be part of the discussion.
Yeah, I also heard the owner of the cafe talk about bus service making it hard for his younger staff to get to work on weekends.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
weekend buses are on my agenda as well. We're moving on our action plan there, particularly through our new enterprise bargaining, which has kicked off with the Transport Workers Union and the bus drivers. So looking forward to seeing what we can do in relation to weekend bus services. In terms of the actual buses themselves, we're wanting to transition all of them to zero emissions to battery electric buses. And so we're in procurement now for 90 electric buses and 34 replacement leased buses at the moment, which we hope will be zero emissions. And that's going to, when you've got a street like Brierly Street, be much quieter. You can barely hear these buses switch on, they're that quiet, and so it really will improve things. Won't have all of that dirty black fumes coming out the back while you're trying to have a coffee. So that'll make a difference. All the option is we remove them from Brierly Street and reroute them around Liggett Street and Parkinson Street using stops on Parkinson Street. So there's an option there that we'll need to consult on.
Just moved in, Chris, on I've forgotten the street now, the one with the large cafes. Really, sorry. It's interesting they're talking about having an outdoor area and extending the pavement. I've seen a very good example of that in my old stadium area in Sydney, recently Coogee Bay Road, which is probably one of the busiest streets in eastern suburbs of Sydney. Originally strip shops, similar that sort of thing. Very busy, two-directional. They've made that one directional. They've pushed the footpaths out and put plantings and planter boxes and stuff on the road edge. And then on the interior, people are somewhat protected outside the cafes. And it seems to be working very well and it looks great. And you can associate that with trees. But I think it would be easy to do that because I don't think we've got, hesitate to say we shouldn't have any more parking at Coolio, but I don't think we need those two strips of parking there. About 12 cars or whatever. It seems quite pointless, and you could easily get rid of those, expand the footpaths, do the planter box and the trees and the outdoor fresco thing. Anyway, that's my suggestion.
Yeah, but I think there's an option. Yeah. There's potentially an option in between that includes parking, but still having one way and narrowing the road. People won't want to sit out on the pavement having lunch or whatever at a cafe if they don't feel safe. And so part of it is actually making sure that people feel safe. Widening the verge can do that, but also other treatments. It's very bare along there at the moment. So yeah, softening the area is part of the discussion around can we put in some more permeable surfaces which will help to reduce the heat island effect and just make it a more pleasant place to be really and dwell rather than just nipping in, getting coffee and leaving.
Are there any more questions in there?
Thank you.
We can move forward.
Continue the discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I might invite Richard and Sophie up to talk about the Duffy shops upgrade. I believe you've got a presentation already loaded.
We do.
So Sophie Clement, I work with Transport Canberra and City Services in the infrastructure delivery area, and our team has been doing some work on the Duffy shops upgrade, which some of you are probably aware of. So we're at the moment undertaking, is that better? Yep. So we're running a project at the moment that's progressing a concept through to detailed design. The government has a program a kind of rolling program of upgrading local shopping centres, and Duffy's been identified as a priority. I think if you've been there, it's probably fairly obvious why. It is a little bit tired and certainly could do with a little bit of love. So in 2016-17, we undertook some targeted consultation and developed a concept design basically, and what we've been doing recently is we took that concept design to the community to start a consultation process to inform the next stage of design, which is the detailed design. So some of you may have participated in that consultation process. So just quickly to step back, in 16-17 we looked at the character of the shops, concerns with the shopping centre and what improvements could be made, and you can just see up there the key takeaways and themes that we got through that process. So that's what sort of led into the concept designs. This is just a quick, that was the PSP, or what we call the preliminary sketch plan. Some of you may have seen that on the Your Say consultation that we recently did. And so now here we are. We did the consultation earlier this year. I think it closed on the 10th of May. I'm going to skip through because I feel like I've already talked about this. Right, so through the consultation process, there was a pretty good response from the community in terms of the surveys that were completed, and almost 2,000 views on the actual Your Say website. And we also had a high level of attendance at the pop-up session that we held one Saturday afternoon out there, which was really informative and helpful. So you can see there's some of the key themes that we heard through the consultation, and particularly about the playground, improving the equipment there, and the different types of opportunities for play. There was also strong feedback to look at having some natural play options in the playground as well. There's also a desire for more seating, looking at the sort of shade kind of opportunities as well, looking at landscape improvements across the shopping centre to soften and green the space a little, again looking at reducing that the urban heat effect. There was a strong desire to retain all of the parking. One of the initial concepts looked at using a couple of the parking bays out the front of the shops to put in trees. So that was definitely a strong piece of feedback, particularly from the cafe, that there's a desire to retain that because people often drop in quickly to pick up a coffee on their way to work or between picking up kids. There's also a desire for better integration of the area out the front of the shops with the playground and with the green space adjacent to the playground. And as a part of that, there was quite a bit of feedback about the connection, the path connection from the shops to the north and to the sports fields. Because currently you sort of follow the circular path around the edge, which is the most direct route, and there's a nice desire line at the moment going through the grass there. So that was sort of generally what we heard from the feedback. There was obviously support for doing the upgrade, and people were quite pleased to see that progressing. So, progressing from that consultation, we've used the feedback that we received through that process to update the design through the detailed design process. And a part of that was also testing what's changed since 16-17, because that's a few years prior. And those updates you can see, so we're retaining the parking in front of the shops. What we're actually looking at doing is widening the verge so that we can get some of that improvements to the area outside the shops there. There'll be some improvements to the landscape area in the central part of the parking area. We will do things around the shops in terms of accessibility of the path network to meet standards, and the accessible parking spaces which are currently not standard. So there'll be a general tidy up of the car park. We'll put in a path connection to the north, and then some of the key changes are how we're dealing with the playground itself and the improvements to the playground. So we will have some integrated natural play. We'll look at how it connects to the shopping area and also to the green space adjacent. So I think that was definitely one of the key themes that came through the feedback. I'm not sure what. Yeah. And this is a little bit of a technical drawing, but I think it just shows that if you've seen the prior drawing, that's the development of the play space and what it might look like. And I believe Richmond would be exploring the opportunity of a little bike track that might go around and sort of integrate with what happens there. Oh, the queue got left up top. So that's just, I guess, a general overview. Where we're at now is finalising that detailed design. We will need to do some consultation with our internal asset owners and stakeholders, and we're hoping to have that detailed design completed in August. And so that will be in a position that's fairly close to ready, that we can take out as a package for construction. Yeah. I guess I'll throw to the audience if anyone has any questions. Yep.
Thank you, Sophie. Can we go back to that last illustration, please? I'm just trying to get a bit of a feel for the scale of that and how much bigger than the existing playground that is looking to be.
So, I think it's in the space where the existing playground is. I'm not sure if you can see on the left-hand side of that drawing is the actual edge of the shops. Just here, and you can see the parking bays. Yeah. It is a bit of a technical drawing, and obviously we're still in the kind of developing this stage, so I wouldn't take this as the final design.
So it's in the same footprint basically of the existing.
It's a fair pass. It's more sprawled out, if you like, and it goes further down the hill.
Okay. I'm horticulturist, so I've got a real bent for green spaces, and I've been speaking to a few people about their desire to have more involvement in growing things in that empty space, especially beyond the psychologist rooms. There's a very big vacant space of land, about 15, 20 metres by 20 metres at least. We had talked to a few community members about harvesting the water off the roof of the Duffy shops, and perfect opportunity in the redevelopment to put in plumbing that does harvest that water, potentially with a tank at the end overlooking, from the psychologist rooms in that space, to use that to do some more landscaping, of which the community could participate in management and growing and maintenance.
So I think that's something that we hadn't heard through the community consultation process, so we haven't actually thought about that yet.
Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I think we've only just sort of come up with these ideas since then, so just been thinking there is a wonderful opportunity to harvest again, especially with the view of environmental elements.
So that's a really interesting proposition. I think we'll need some time to kind of process and have a think about that. I do know that through our place management area, we do have an urban volunteer program, so it's something that would link in with that. So if that's something we can take away and just have a bit of a think about, what we can come back to you on.
Yeah, because the community gardens grant scheme was open, which triggered the thinking and the talking, and we missed the deadline for that to get enough interested people, but I certainly had at least 10 or more people who thought they would volunteer their horticultural skills, their time skills, their soil skills, their maintenance skills, similar to the Featherston Gardens style of maintaining that space. And it would benefit all people in that local area and certainly add to the community.
So it's something we can take into consideration.
Thank you very much.
Can I just make a quick comment, and I'll give it to Julia? I'm aware of a number of council members who actually made that recommendation in the feedback about harvesting the rainwater.
Okay, we'll have to check. Did you?
Including myself.
Yeah, so we'll go back and double check. So the harvesting the rainwater is maybe one thing, probably the community garden element I don't think we'd seen in the feedback, but maybe we missed something.
I'm not talking in terms of a closed off space, but just a beautification of that space.
Okay.
Open, and perhaps with some indigenous plants.
So more of a landscaping treatment rather than a...
Maintained by the community with government.
Yep.
Similar to the curtain shops design process that I've been involved in as well.
And certainly looking at those opportunities for how to get... That was a strong theme that came through in the consultation, was that shopping centres are a community hub.
Yeah.
And what do we do with our upgrades to support that? Yeah.
The playgrounds are one thing, but they're not a place that you walk through on your way to the shops, or that you like to be within as an adult, you know, not just a playground space.
So I just want to say thank you so much for coming to this. I actually did ask Chris for a briefing on what was going on, and he said no to me. So I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk to you. I also gave him a copy of the plan from the website with the trees highlighted, because it was creating such a conversation in the suburb. People are a bit scared, I think, actually, of losing parking, so I'm really glad to hear that that's been resolved, so thank you. Also, there is a garden bed that was planted out with shrubs that's up on the other side of the built shops, towards the green space at the top.
On the southern side, I guess it would be.
No, well...
If you're facing the shops to the right.
Yes, correct, sorry. And when I was first elected, I asked actually Shane Rattenbury if we could have a community garden on that plot, because it was vacant, empty at the time, and he said no. So I was really sorry about that. But I'm not living in the past by any means. I would like to have that opportunity as well, as this lady was mentioning, to have some community ability to get in and get their hands dirty on a regular basis. See, at the time I was thinking it would be great to do herbs. And one of the reasons I thought herbs is because they're really hardy, they don't take a lot of maintenance, and people can come and harvest them. Now that garden bed just has shrubs in it now, and I mean, it's lovely to have shrubs, but that don't add a great deal. And you're probably thinking of digging up that bed anyway, so I'll just go back to my original suggestion. It would be so good to have a plot which was community involved, and you know, I would be very happy to make sure that it was looked after. Like, I would be happy to be involved with that as a local member. I live just up the road.
So we can put that down for consideration. Yeah, definitely. Yep. Looking at how we can have, you know, productivity in our...
Also, just a question, are we keeping our COVID-safe rocks in the middle of the... We've probably been attached to the rocks, so the huge boulders that are in the middle of the car park. Which,
that was one of the first things that we wanted to retain.
Yeah.
So the current design has much of that tree. There's three trees, one sort of looking a little bit worse than that.
Yeah.
But it is a wonderful habitat tree. And to try and retain as much of those trees as possible, so that we can retain.
Yeah, when the pandemic started, we realised how great those huge boulders were, because you could sit on them and you're over
and
2 meters away from each other.
I like that COVID-safe boulders.
The COVID-safe boulders, yeah.
Just a quick question, can we go back to the previous picture again, please? In the right-hand side picture, what's underneath where the slides are? It looks like concrete from here.
That's just a little example of what the look and feel of what we might be thinking of, but that's certainly not what we'll be producing at the end. So that's an example from another place. Generally on our playgrounds we have tan bark or soft fall, and there are often sections of concrete that are connecting between different play equipment, but if it was within a fall zone or a kind of play equipment area, it would be something soft. Yep.
Yeah, just looks like concrete.
And that may be, I think that could be sand actually, looking a little bit closer.
A lot of young kids moving in now. There's a real increase of 2 and 3-year-olds in Duffy, which is new, you know.
And I think that's one thing we heard was the age range of the play equipment, to expand that out a bit. Yeah. No more questions?
We've got bicycle parking staying, bike parking,
We'll be adding in bike
because
parking.
there's some
Yeah.
in now that, yeah.
Yeah. We'll retain what's there and likely increase it. Yeah.
I know this is a tricky question, but I've not heard a proper answer yet from anyone. The Chinese restaurant that is closed up,
Oh, I've actually done some work on this.
what is the situation?
Yeah,
It's been on there.
Unless you've got an answer.
We
No,
that's
so I asked Chris to do some work on the theory is that there may be someone living in there. Chris had city services go out and check, or whatever the compliance people are, go and check. They didn't witness anything, couldn't raise anybody, so they said they're not doing any further work on it now. But in reality, someone needs to produce some evidence, unfortunately, or something to be done. There are a few of those. There's one at Fisher as well. But yes, I think I'm pretty convinced someone's living there, and that's
And
not.
is that not correct?
It's not really correct because it's not the use that the place has been purchased for and designed for. Nobody wants to see anybody out in the cold, but ideally there would be a plan for it to become a functional shop again. So at the moment we're at a standstill, but I haven't finished. I'm working with the psychologist and the cafe, so I want to maybe try and get some evidence. No, it's really tough. Like I think everybody loves that family who ran the shop, so the restaurant. So we don't want anybody to feel distressed.
That's it.
Yes, you can run, I think, Sophie. Thank you very much for that.
It's just the dates for the pop-up sessions in case anyone was interested for Brierly Street.
Oh, right.
It's on the YourSay website, but I just thought while we're here we'll quickly pop that up, even though I know the Minister did speak about it quite comprehensively. Thank you.
That's not closing it down, though, is it?
Thank you very much for being here today. Both of you. I'm sure we will quit soon. Note to self, do not have live mic when you walk past amplifier. I'll learn one day. Arising out of my earlier chaos, I neglected to do a couple of things. I'll try to do it now. Firstly, we put some apologies this evening. Dr. Marissa Patterson, Sloane Hunter, committee member, and Warwick Lay has sent apologies in. I imagine there'll be some others. Gina Coulthard sent one in during the week. Are there any others please aware of?
Michelle Weston.
Oh, and Michelle Weston, one of our committee members, due to various circumstances, has to leave Canberra this time of year. But we'll be back. The other thing is the acknowledgement of the country. Once again, my fault. Overlooked at trying to plug wires in and things up and all that. We're honoured to be meeting on the ancestral lands of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge these first Australians as the traditional custodians of this land, whose cultures are among the oldest living in human history. We pay respect to the elders of the communities in the Murrumbidgee region
and extend our recognition to their descendants, past, present and future. Okay, moving on to the minutes of the last meeting. Have we seen them, read them, got any comments on them? Is anybody prepared to move that they be accepted? Thank you, Shelby. And Rosemary seconding that. Thank you, Rosemary. Any business arising from those minutes? No? Now, I'll do a brief Chair's report. There's been quite a bit going on. There's been quite a bit going on. Council's been quite active, like for example today, the Brierly St launch, that took about an hour down there, and then a media interview later on, further conversation with the Riot Act, so watch all the bits and pieces come through. But the key thing is, on your say, make sure you do have your say. Now, I was very pleased in the media material that they took a lot of the output from our earlier survey, which we conducted based on the earlier conversation Tom and I had with Chris Steele, and we asked the people what they thought. I need to make it very clear, we are an advocacy representative body. We are not part of government, and I've made that clear a number of times, because during that survey, people said, well, we'll just do it anyway, you're just an arm of government, you're just telling us what you want to do. So I'll just make that clear again, including those people at home, that we're not, and if something happens that you don't think is right, let us know, and we'll have a go at seeing if we can have at least have a bit of a fight on the steps of the Assembly. So we've got a new phone number, and this is important. It's a mobile number. Mobiles are pretty well universal now. 0458 756034. It's on our website, it's on our Facebook page. We are in the process of trying to get the telephone directory updated online. If you need to contact us, we prefer you use that. Because what we can do is, if something is away, we just rotate the mobile phone around. A lot easier than trying to work out how to pass a landline around. Also, the district planning consultation has started, and you may have seen that, and Chris mentioned it as well. We went to a workshop down here in Stirling, a few of us. It was on that really stormy, wet, horrible night. We had about 9 or 10 of us there. And the district planning is going to form part of the territory plan. So they're going to devise district plans. Well, you're too close.
Speak up.
Yeah, sorry, Mike. Good. Okay, district planning. It's underway. There is a facility on the Your Say site. They're seeking feedback. I encourage everybody to provide reasonable but robust feedback. Now, if you look at the risks around here, we're fairly low-rise. Look what's happening over at Woden, look what's happening in Belconnen, look what's happening in Civic. Do you want to preserve the character of the village here? Or you want to open site? You know, it's potentially, if I was a developer, I'd go brownfield site, pretty cheap, I'll get in there and put a few high rises. And I imagine they're looking at it and thinking about it. It could be a good chance for us to preserve the character and get some really good outcomes if we get on there and actually say, hey, this is what we think. If we don't, we really need to accept it. It's no good screaming after you've been consulted. That's obvious nonsense.
Okay, now, we are streaming the meeting. It's become very important in these COVID times that we do it. Now, last meeting where we had the Yolanda, Wombat woman, and the other one, Ranger, I forgot. They were very good speakers. Oh, the gastro. And we've had lots of feedback. We've had lots of conversations, especially the gastro people. But my point is, we had over 700 unique views. So while we're sitting here in our little room with the hardy ones, we had 700 odd people. Tonight we've got a steady 8 people watching. So they're there, so add them into the total, it's starting to grow. But, you know, there's people that've got work, they've got caring, they've got little kids, they've got all sorts of things. And it's why we're streaming, because the community said we would like digital engagement. So we did it. The government gave us a new support. We've now invested in a new PA system to try to get better sound down the line. When it squawks, there's always somebody who gets online and goes, feedback, feedback, as if coming out of their speakers. But I guess what I'm getting at, and tonight's been good, but looking forward, can we think about our questions and not try to drag them on too much so it looks like Q&A and ABC and some of those interminable ones? You're guilty, I've done it a few times. It was around the right way, and yeah, and apologies to the folk at home. We've only got a couple of questions that I've asked, because I haven't been able to run from there with a roving mic over to the computer, back again, and all those other things. Hopefully next meeting will have a few more people on deck, and we'll be able to get a bit more done. And of course we're always open to volunteers. So back to the agenda items. Janice, are we wanting to retreat as a report? Are we able to?
Yeah, I've got the figures. Yeah, I've got the figures.
Do you want I could bring you one. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's definitely on, can you hear me?
Yes, so the people can see you as well.
I've got to come over as well.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. That's it? Okay. Thanks very much for that, Bill. As you know, we're coming to the end of the financial year. We've had quite an active year. We've, as I said, we've been purchasing new equipment to enable us to reach more people than we can reach here physically in the room, and it's actually paid off quite good dividends, so we're very pleased with the responses that we're getting to that. We've also, at the AGM we'll give you a full breakdown of what we've spent this year, but at the moment we've got $10,018 sitting in our WCCC account. And Featherston Gardens has 5,592. Now, when we get our grants, we don't get them until September, so even though we've got money sitting at the end of the financial year, that money now will carry over and keep us going until we hopefully get another grant in September. That's one of the things about having financial accounts on a financial year. You still have to carry money for about 3 months. But that's where we stand at the moment. And all being well, our auditor will like us when we put our accounts in. Sorry.
Thank you, Janice. Yes, look, in case I don't do it later, I'd really like to thank Janice for her hard work. She's a real silent achievement in the community. and she somehow manages to keep us honest when we have all these crazy ideas. Says you've got to do it within your budget, you've got to do those reports. And it's a real pleasure to have Beavis here with us. So I'm doing that in case I think to do it at another time. I'll try. Now, what we've been doing in recent weeks is just have a bit of a have your say from the floor to try to draw out anything people might be seeing, feeling, thinking. And some of those things that have come out have actually resulted in stuff being fixed around town. And some of the long-standing things that people might have just missed. My favourite is the sewer pipe down behind the tennis courts. Somebody raised that, and a couple of days later I went down to take a photo and had a look at the sniff. And there was a man from the water people there actually fixing it. And I haven't heard any more negative reports about it.
Very good, thank you.
So it's worth raising it, because what I have learned is also the advisors in the various ministers' office actually look at the video later and pick these things out and actually move with the bureaucracy to get these things done. So another benefit of going online, I guess, and streaming. Didn't you know WCCC Radio this morning? She said, and what else did you want from Mr. Searle? And I said, toilets at Featherston Gardens. We're happy with that. Okay, any questions, any issues, points?
Chris feels that the welfare is lacking. There is no...
Well, we're giving you a microphone so people at home can hear you, Nora.
You didn't have it up there, so I didn't raise that in the welfare, but there is no animal welfare under Chris Steele, and I don't know whether you'd be interested in getting onto that. I've got expertise back since the 1980s with animal welfare started in the 70s with us, so it was the wildlife rehabilitation started in the 1980s with me, so I've been at it for a long time, and what's going on is really horrific. So we could like to get into that. But Brierly St, if I could just raise, if that gets shut down, you realise traffic congestion is going to be really, really bad. Directing everyone to Leichhardt Street, and it's a bad idea.
I'm trying to remain neutral on that, Nora. I have a view. I ran the last survey. I saw the strength of opinion. There are just as many people who think the opposite to you on that. And I think I might just take a quiet step back and watch it go on that way. And I said to Chris today, and I know that we picked it up, I said, government will need to show leadership on that. They will need to balance up the views, not be populist, because the views are split 50-50, and they'll need to actually make a call and wear the flag from half the people, because the other half will be happy. And he's taken it on board. Any other? Oh, yeah. I forgot. Again. My bad. We usually turn some time over to our MLAs. We would come out on a cold night, all masked up. Cool, you draw the shorts.
I'll do this.
Hi everyone. Really appreciated hearing everyone's questions tonight, so thank you very much to all the people who have tuned in and sent comments and questions, and the people who came out tonight. I find this really interesting to be able to hear all of your thoughts and questions. I wanted to tell you about just a few small things that have happened since our last meeting. We had a World Elder Abuse Awareness Day event here. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was, I think it was the 15th of June. An event was hosted here in this community hall. And what it was about was trying to help people to understand what abuse against older people can look like, what are the warning signs that it might be happening, and if you think that it might be happening to someone in your community, who can you go to for help and how can you support someone to make sure that people who are at risk of this have access to the right support services. Fantastic event organised by Communities at Work, and Jenny Mobbs from CODA ACT, Council of the Ageing, came and facilitated a panel discussion which included legal aid, police, and various other services that can help people. Public Trustee and Guardian was there as well, and found it very, very helpful. In the last sitting week, Joe Clay, our Greens MLA in Ginninderra, presented a bill on vulnerable road users. Now, what that's about is people who are vulnerable road users include pedestrians, motorcycle riders, bicycle riders, scooter riders. Sorry, scooter riders, skateboarders. So a lot of us, even if we're not, a pedestrian or riding a bicycle all the way to work every day, we're still, all of us at times are vulnerable road users when we're walking short distances or cycling a short distance or riding a motorcycle. What this was about was trying to get some recognition through raising the fine if an accident happens and a vulnerable road user is injured by a negligent driver, to try and raising people's awareness that actually this is quite a serious thing if you were to accidentally hit a cyclist or a pedestrian, and to try and encourage people to think about what that means for someone's life if that kind of accident happens. So I expect that will be debated in a future sitting, and I'm looking forward to that. The other thing I wanted to briefly mention is vaccinations. With everything that's going on at the moment, it's more important than ever that if you're eligible for a vaccination and you haven't had one yet, it's really worthwhile booking in. There's an additional vaccination clinic that's opened up out at Canberra Airport. There's the Garran clinic that's doing Pfizer and has accessible bookings for people who have mobility issues or disabilities or sensory issues, if that's what you need. There's also AstraZeneca at Calvary, or you can see your local GP as well if you want to talk about AstraZeneca. So if there's anyone who's thinking about getting vaccinated and hasn't done it yet, now is a really good time to go to covid19.act.gov.au. Follow the links there, you can get lots of information about vaccination, what to be aware of, and what the process is like to go and get vaccinated. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Nora.
I've got a comment. You're aware that we're dealing with a different strain of COVID, and those vaccinations aren't working. They're killing people, but they're not working to kill the virus, because we've got the dangerous Indian virus here now. So these vaccines are just outdated.
There's actually multiple different variants of the virus out there circulating, and the difficulty is that if you don't get vaccinated, then you are susceptible to getting any of those strains. So it's really important that you do what you can to protect yourself and protect others around you by getting vaccinated if you're able to do that. It really will make a difference. The other thing to keep doing is practicing the physical distancing and hygiene practices that we've been doing now for about 15 months. We're pretty good at in the ACT. All we've done is add in a bit of mask wearing, so it's just one more little extra step, but all of those things about hand washing, sanitising, staying 1.5 metres apart, and trying to avoid large crowds where you can, it all helps to make a difference, and making sure that you check in when you go into places so that if something does happen, we know who to call to say, hey, you might want to just go and get tested. Yes, another question?
Hi, Andy, just a question. What do you do if you're not eligible for Pfizer but you want the Pfizer?
So it's a really good idea to have a talk with your GP about a situation like that. So if you've got concerns about the AstraZeneca vaccine, talking to your GP is a really good idea because they know your individual health history and they can have a conversation with you about what this means for you personally, as opposed to generalisations. Okay, thanks. Over to you, Julia.
I think in the mask fashion stakes, Emma and I are up there. I've got Marvel characters. She's got is it Darth Vader. I just want to take the opportunity to put my thanks on the record to Tom and Pat, having stepped down from the committee a little while ago, for their hard work over many years. And I haven't had the opportunity to do that, and to acknowledge the traditional custodians too. I want to thank Bill, Michelle, Simone, Janice and all the committee who've been working so hard this year. I really felt so happy to be at the bulb planting for the Floriade in the suburbs that we were doing a few weeks ago on the weekend down on the corner of Darwinia and Streeton. Can't wait for the spring to see those come up. My kids are really excited about that too. I just also want to thank the committee because we found a public housing issue that was going on very close to that garden bed of a lady whose roof had caved in during the night before, and it's been resolved. Actually, I was over there the other day door knocking, so a little bit of work from everybody, but the committees actually was very helpful in that as well. Sometimes when things are raised by not the politicians, they get resolved faster because there's less animosity, and that's just a reality of politics. So I'm really grateful that, because it's such an important matter, that it was resolved quickly. Last week in the Chamber, we were working on a few areas, the Choose CBR scheme, and some concerns about how that was run out and how quickly the money all went. So we've asked a few questions about that, and the government is looking into it, and there's a possibility that the Auditor General will have a little look at that, which is their job if there's any concerns. We discussed the amenity around Lake Tuggeranong, a little bit like a debate we had earlier in the year, which was about the lake up in Gungahlin, because local members really like to have their local areas strong, like we do here as well. And Jeremy Hansen moved a motion to discuss directions in education. He's put out a paper about directions in education, which you can get a copy of from me or from his office. And that's about our view from the Liberals side of trying to make life a bit easier for teachers with a bit less administration, and focusing on the basics, especially in the early years, to up our literacy and numeracy, where there's more guidance for the younger children. So it's a really interesting paper to read. I recommend you have a read of that. It's also obviously getting towards the end of the financial year, and we're looking at the political situation and people's, the burdens on the community. So we know that the rates are going up again, and the domestic violence levy is going up again by a bit, so long as that money is being used well, which I think is something we've debated a little bit. Water and sewage, electricity, all those things, and how they're impacting on people. We keep a very close eye on those cost of living issues. It's a really big part of our philosophy, is to make sure that people can thrive and not just survive under the costs of living in this city. And I just wanted to touch on that I had a briefing with the Chief Health Officer today, which I have about once a month as the Shadow Minister for Health, and she was very open, and she always answers all my questions. We talked about the lineups for testing, which for the last couple of days have been really extreme. That number already has started to come down a bit today. They've upped the number of tests, so we're doing about 1,300 or 1,400 a day, which is the nationally recommended number for a population of our size when there's a spike in concern. But I have been receiving a lot of messages from people in the lineups in their cars, very distressed about the amount of time that's taken. And I just want to reiterate that the reason that we're doing masks indoors now is because we have 24,000 people in the ACT who've self-declared that they are in the Greater Sydney area, and 10,000 of those people are on stay-at-home orders. So the chances of there already being a case somewhere in the ACT is reasonable, especially with the current variant, as Nora mentioned. So as many people as can wear the masks and be okay with that, the safer we all are. So I just thank everybody for doing their best in that regard. I know they're not easy to wear. I find them really difficult to wear, but we do the best we can. I also asked about pharmacies being involved in the rollout of the vaccine, and that's for stage 3, which is now planned to come in around September, October. So there will come a point where it's even easier to get the vaccine for those who haven't managed it, but at the moment we're still going with those appointment-based options. And we have, as Emma mentioned, 3 government clinics as well as 70 GP clinics in the ACT who are rolling out the vaccine. So look, I just thank you all for being here and voicing the needs of the community, and for the people online and watching later. Thank you for being an active community. The more active that we are, the better it will be for us. And I will certainly be going and having a chat to the village building company about toilets in Featherston Gardens, hopefully before the next meeting. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks, Phil. I'm not sure that you were here last time, Julie, but
no.
I think 3 meetings ago I asked for the air conditioning reports in Canberra, but nothing's eventuated. Has anything been received by council yet, Bill?
No.
Look, I did have a look for it. I did have a search for it on the various ACT government websites, and I couldn't find anything of what you were talking about. So it's good to raise it again. I'll have another look.
If we know what it is precisely we're looking for, and if it's not easily forthcoming, then I can always put an FOI, but once we know what exactly it's called.
It started off when the smoke was here, and they were trying to get the clubs to upgrade.
Are the filters?
The filters, yes.
So we basically want an update on the filters situation.
Yes, because that could be beneficial for COVID as well.
And at the time, was that reported in the press, or like how did you find out about it?
Through a friend, but she wouldn't pass it on because she said it was probably confidential or something, but that was
perhaps
over a year ago now.
Perhaps Michelle can flick me an email and then I'll get it on my program of work to ask some questions. I'm sorry that you haven't got that yet. Yeah, very happy to ask. It depends how they're storing that information, or if they're storing that information at the government level.
I think I might know a little bit more about that now that you've clarified it. I was invited to some consultation into that report, and provided some quite robust input. I spent an evening sitting next to Craig Wallace, who I worked with for a long time. We all know Craig. So we were able to actually push quite hard on a number of points, including the failure to properly monitor the air quality over here outdoors, which is something I've been on about for a little while. So I think I might have a report. So I'll have a look tomorrow for you and see if I can get it to you. If I don't, we'll fire a note to Julia and go from there.
Thank you very much. Anyone else got any questions? Thank you.
Unbelievable. Not even 9:30. Thank you, Emma and Julia.
I was going to say something about COVID. Everything I read suggests we should. I took the big step, went, got stabbed, and it gave me an excuse for 2 days to have manhood, which was great. Look, what I'm getting at, I'm setting up my arms moving. It wasn't that bad, really. It's quite civilised. But you sit down at every point, they sit you down. And at the end, they give you a little card, you go, sit here for 15 minutes, and they don't let you out until 15 minutes are elapsed, exactly, and off you go. It's not that bad. I'm going back again in September, which is my 12 weeks. And I expect it to be quite reasonable. Everything I read, it says the first one, if you have a reaction, you'll probably have a similar, lesser reaction to the second one, made a slight reaction, so expect a slight reaction. It was actually less of a reaction than I got to the flu jab, which I had 16 days before. So, that's why we want it, and that was AstraZeneca. Is there anything else? One last thought for any questions, issues, points?
Did you have Pfizer injection?
No, yes, AstraZeneca.
But the first shot, I was supposed to be the second one.
Yeah, I was first shot, and I did read up on it, Nora. I don't just take guidance, I have a good look at what's going on. I read the data, I've got a friend who's a health nutrition or whatever, fancy name. He's plotting all the stuff going on. He's also plotting infection rates. He's plotting vaccination rates. And by the way, the vaccination rate being reported, I'm convinced there's a 5-day lag in it. I think we're more vaccinated than has been reported.
We're also slightly more vaccinated here than the rest of the country. Just slightly ahead.
We don't. Tasmania is about to overtake us today. I don't know how, but I'm tracking. I'm watching. I can look every day. It's actually, if you look at where we're going, I think it's going to ramp up quite positively, as long as they can keep supply up. I think the fires might be a bit of a setback, and the biggest thing is this resistance to being vaccinated.
It should be removed. They're actually talking about removing it. 1 minute they were telling everyone should have it, then they did a backflip on it, the federal government, and they've stepped back on it. Yeah. So they're still looking into it, but it should be removed.